Close your eyes for a moment. Let the modern world slowly slip away. The sound of traffic fades, the bright screens go dark, and the air turns cold and damp. Imagine the ground beneath you is no longer tile, but ancient stone, worn down by thousands of footsteps. The ticking clock is replaced by the whisper of wind and the creak of old wood. Take a slow breath and let us walk backward through time. Not in haste, not with blinding lights, but with quiet steps into a century that is no longer called by numbers, but by murmurs. Tonight, we visit a castle standing far from any main road, hidden deep in a northern forest, where moss climbs the walls and owls keep watch at the gates. Long ago, this castle belonged to a noble whose name is rarely spoken. Not because he was forgotten, but because his name brings discomfort when uttered. It is said that within that castle lies one room, never opened again since the winter of 1314. Not from neglect, not from disrepair, but because they tried everything to keep it shut. They sealed it with 17 crosses carved by trembling hands. They locked the door with iron chains and oak, reinforced with prayer. But as we will soon see together, sometimes fear cannot be nailed down. Sometimes whispers cannot be caged. And night is always the time when everything returns. So pull your blanket close, steady your breath, and follow me. We will reopen the history they sealed, quietly, gently, without noise. Only observation and silence. Imagine arriving outside the castle on a night without stars. No lanterns lit, no voices from within. The stone walls rise tall, cold and wet, as if they haven't welcomed a soul since the 14th century. The main gate is no longer functional, part of it rusted shut, the rest swallowed by time. Yet a narrow path remains on the eastern side, overgrown with thorns, just wide enough to crawl through if you dare to bend low. Inside, the scent of dampness and ancient dust greets you. The floor is scattered with crumbled wood, remnants of straw, and broken wax drippings left untouched. Time seems to pause here. There are no signs of the modern world. Even the dust appears as a silent witness. Your footsteps, though soft, echo through corridors once alive with the laughter of noble children and the thunder of guests feasting. On the walls, old portraits sway slightly, not by wind, but by something gentler than air. You pass the main hall, once warmed by fire. Now only soot remains. Then you descend a narrow spiral staircase, its handrail cold as cemetery iron. This stairway does not lead to a cellar or a kitchen. It turns inward into the belly of the castle, toward the part that has not been touched since a curse was said to have fallen. And there, hidden in silence, rests a door unlike the others. Older, darker, wounded. 17 crosses are carved across it, none of them aligned, as if etched by hands desperate to leave. You can sense something unfinished, as if this door holds back something that still longs to return to the night. The crosses were unlike the religious symbols commonly found in old churches. They were rough, carved in haste, showing no recognizable pattern. Some were nearly erased by time, but their grooves still lingered, hinting at the force once used to make them. People believed these crosses weren't meant for protection, but as warnings. An old monk who once lived near the valley said the room behind the door wasn't meant for anyone to enter, but to ensure that what lay inside could never leave. He never spoke its name, never described its contents, only hinted that any sane soul should stay away. But humans rarely learn from whispers of the past. In 1794, a group of French revolutionary soldiers stumbled upon the castle and used it as a temporary refuge. They found the room marked with crosses, and thinking it merely aristocratic superstition, they opened the door. Not one of them survived past autumn. Their journals recorded complaints growing stranger by the day, whispers with no source, dreams that repeated without end, and shadows appearing even when the only light came from dying candles. Even the final entry, scrawled by a trembling hand, claims someone had begun speaking to the walls. The walls spoke back. After that, the castle was abandoned again. The villagers never touched it. The priests dared not approach, and the room was sealed once more. The 17 crosses recarved, though the hands that etched them no longer believed it would be enough. Imagine walking through the mist that clings to the courtyard of that castle. The air feels damp and ancient, like inhaling the breath left behind by another century. Moss-covered stone walls echo your footsteps, though sometimes the echoes come from directions that make no sense. A wind that does not move reveals the scent of wet earth. And behind the rusted wooden gate lies a narrow, dark corridor that swallows light before it can touch the floor. Some call that corridor the castle's throat, where centuries of whispers and grudges gather and curl in silence. Even bats refuse to fly within it. If you walk it, every inch pulls the temperature lower, as if the world outside has retreated. And at the end of the corridor, beyond a stone curtain lifted by time, you'll find an old wooden door. Closed, but not locked, surrounded by faded carvings of crosses. There are claw marks on the frame, too deep to be made by human hands, too many to be counted with fingers. There is no sound nearby, but the silence is thick, as if someone is holding their breath. Some who dared to approach say they smelled old blood dried and fused with the wood. But there are no stains, no bodies, only air growing heavier, and a faint whisper like someone muttering a name no one remembers. Again and again, without pause. If you stand there longer than 5 minutes, time begins to stretch. The shadow of your body shifts before your body moves. Then, in an undefinable moment, you feel watched not by eyes, but by something older than sight. The villagers near the castle rarely speak of that room. They do not say its name, do not point in its direction, and when asked, they avert their eyes as if their gaze might burn simply from recalling it. Children are warned never to enter the eastern yard, and when one boy once dared to break that rule, he returned silent and never spoke again in his life. He only drew the same shape in the dirt over and over, a misshapen circle crossed by 7 lines, like a web or a broken wheel. The farmers called it the mark of the locked one, though none truly knew who or what they meant. The old healer on the hill, said to have read ancient manuscripts from distant monasteries, claimed that the symbol came from an old sealing system. The 7 lines were not merely physical barriers, but divisions between human thought and something beyond understanding. But the problem is, the crosses carved on that door, number 17. 10 more than any system would require. It wasn't reinforcement, it was a warning. Someone in the past didn't just want to seal the room. They wanted to ensure that anyone who came after would know that what lay behind should not be opened, even by accident. But history has a strange way of forgetting its warnings. Over time, the castle was inherited, sold, partly demolished, rebuilt, rented, then left to rot. No one remembers who last opened that room. Only one faded record remains, written in iron ink in the gatekeeper's logbook. A single line. We sealed it again, but the whispers still come. Today, the room remains locked, hidden behind a narrow hallway now buried beneath rubble. But the unsettling part isn't just what lies inside, it's what happens around it. Every autumn, a single crow is always found dead on the threshold of that room. Its body intact, uninjured, not killed by beast or man, just stiff as if frozen in fear. No one knows how the bird gets inside the castle, let alone why it lies exactly on the carved wooden sill. Each season a different bird, but always a crow. Never a hawk, never a dove, never a small finch. A crow, glossy black, with eyes that stay open even after the body has gone cold. And if someone dares to take the body and burn it outside the castle wall, its ashes never scatter with the wind. They fall slowly like heavy sand and form strange patterns on the ground's spiraling lines, as if an invisible hand is writing something unreadable. The people who witnessed this never stayed long in the village. They slowly moved away, quietly, without selling their homes, without offering any reason. And those empty homes, one by one, began to show patches of dark red mold spreading on the ceilings. Mold that could not be scrubbed away, could not be scraped, not even with fire. When smelled, the mold carried the scent of old metal and wet earth, like something buried too long that has begun to rise again. The sealed room may never be opened again, but its influence slowly spreads beyond its walls, redrawing the border between what is locked and what is free. And no one knows how far it will reach until it is far too late. Let us observe how this castle is now treated by time. Its outer walls still stand, yes, but no one truly maintains or guards it. Not because funding is scarce, but because people always stop halfway. Archaeologists, historians, even documentary photographers, they arrive with enthusiasm, then leave in silence. They never explain why, yet almost all of them leave behind the same note, unofficial, handwritten, often found tucked among their personal belongings, containing just one sentence. The handwriting varies, the languages differ, but the meaning is the same. In truth, the room is not closed. A puzzling sentence, since the door is clearly locked and the key is nowhere to be found. But perhaps they weren't speaking of wood and hinges. Perhaps they meant the room remains open to something more subtle, something that does not require a door. And if that room can flow outward, then another world might flow inward. Around the castle, plants grow that are not recorded in local botany. Their leaves are narrow and thorned, stems shaped like bone, and when broken, they bleed thick black liquid, not green or clear. Locals call it the mute root, because no birds sing near where it grows. Even the wind seems reluctant to pass through, as if the air itself knows that something should not be awakened there. Strangely, the plant only grows within a certain radius of the castle, never spreading farther, as if it knows the boundary of its influence. But that boundary, like all borders in history, slowly fades as well. We do not know what will happen when the plant finally grows beyond the reach of the castle-less shadow. But history has a way of repeating itself. Not because it forgets, but because we refuse to read its warnings. Imagine you live in the village closest to that castle, an old settlement that never grows, yet never dies. The number of its inhabitants always remains the same, as if an unspoken rule preserves the balance. Whenever a baby is born, news will quietly spread that someone has left, though no one ever sees who. There are no newspapers, no post, only whispers from mouth to ear. The houses are never renovated, only the decayed parts are replaced. Windows remain small, as if afraid too much light might enter. At night, there is no barking of dogs, no crowing of roosters. Only the wind and a soft sigh from the forest that stands between the village and the castle, like the breath of an old creature not yet finished sleeping. The villagers are kind, but not friendly. They show no interest in asking about you, and they never speak of history. If you mention the castle, they go silent. If you ask about the sealed room, they simply touch their left shoulder with their right hand and turn their gaze away. Some of the elders say it is not because they fear what's inside, but because they fear what memory brings. Because some things live only if we speak them. Because some memories wait for human voices to awaken. So, they choose silence. But children who have yet to learn how to scare themselves sometimes play too far. And if they do not return before dusk, that night there will be sounds from the castle's direction. The sound of small footsteps on old stone. The sound of something clawing at the walls as if wanting to come in, or perhaps come out. And the next day, one window in the village will be boarded shut. Someone will say that family is in mourning. But there is no funeral. No name is spoken. And strangely, no one ever mentions that child again, as if they never existed. As if everything that drifts too close to the castle is slowly drawn in and then forgotten. Now imagine you are a researcher. Perhaps you teach at a small university whose buildings are older than its students. Perhaps you're tired of writing papers read by 10 people and then forgotten. And maybe, during one sleepless night, you stumble upon an old note about that castle, hidden among unscanned, dusty manuscripts. Handwritten words in the lower margin mention something you've never heard before. 17 crosses, and still it sighs. You're intrigued. You feel something unfinished. So you submit a grant application. You search through ancient maps, and finally you find the name. Chateau de Mont. A name that doesn't even appear on Google Maps. The nearest village has no signal, and the castle has almost no trace. No articles, no reviews, just a single photo from 1902 showing the top of a tower surrounded by fog. But you go anyway. Because in the world of research, the best discoveries don't come from the popular. They come from the nearly forgotten. So you arrive at the village, carrying a backpack full of equipment, infrared cameras, sensitive microphones, and a copy of the old note that brought you here. The villagers only look at you, then lower their eyes. No welcome, no hostility. Just a strange quiet, as if the air itself is thicker than usual. You rent a room in an old house with walls too thin to block the sounds of night. And when you ask the owner where the castle is, she only points with her eyes. That road, straight. But don't come back late. You smile, thinking it's just a local myth. But that night, you can't sleep. Because even without wind, the window keeps tapping, as if something outside is pacing back and forth. But you came to answer a question. You cannot turn back now. The next day, you wake up earlier than usual. The morning air feels heavy, and your steps cut through fog that's too thick for such an early hour. A moss-covered stone path guides your feet away from the village. There are no signs, no fences. It's only overgrown trees and a forest sound that doesn't feel quite right. Birds don't sing. Leaves don't move. Even the sound of your footsteps feels absorbed by the ground. You walk for about 2 kilometers before you see the silhouette. A tower with a sloped roof, a single round window gaping like a toothless mouth, and stone walls that seem too tall for an abandoned building. C.H. Toe de Montbris. Up close, the castle doesn't look majestic. Resembles ruins that refuse to collapse. Part of the wall is cracked, and the main gate is nearly falling, propped up by rotting wood. But you didn't come for beauty. You came for the whisper. So you enter. Your footsteps echo, even though you're not walking on stone. Inside, the scent of dampness and ancient soil greets you. A spiral staircase leads upward, but you're searching for something else. That room. The one mentioned in the old note. You find a narrow hallway, covered in cobwebs, and at the end, the door. Firmly shut. But you know it's no ordinary door, because carved into the wood are 17 crosses. Not painted, not drawn, but gouged deeply, like wounds that never healed else. You run your fingers over the carvings. They feel rough, cold, and slightly moist, as if newly made just yesterday. You place a microphone. You turn on your camera. You begin recording and wait. There's no sound, only your heartbeat. But when you turn to grab your notes, you hear something behind the door. Very faint, almost like breathing, but irregular. And you know you are not alone. You don't open the door. Not out of fear, but because you realize that not everything in this world should be opened just because it can. You sit on the stone floor, your back resting against the damp wall, and you wait. You close your eyes, trying to better understand the sound. Sometimes it's like a breath, sometimes like someone tapping wood from inside. Not strong, not urgent. Like a ritual carried out for hundreds of years, repeating endlessly. You write everything down, your hands slightly trembling, but the sound never becomes a threat. It doesn't growl, it doesn't beg. It just exists, like fog you cannot push away. Then you see something under the door. It's a thin line of moisture, dark, like a slow seep. But its color is deep red. Too thick for water. You grab a tissue and touch it, but the stain vanishes instantly. The floor is dry again. As if whatever it was, it only wanted to play with you. As you trace your steps back through the corridor, you notice something. the carved crosses. Now there are 18. One more, new, still wet, still dripping, and no one else had entered with you. You return home quickly. The camera stayed on until the battery died, but the recording is silent. No sound, no carvings, no breath, just an empty room. Even the door isn't captured, as if the castle itself refused to be documented. You check again the next day. The castle is still there, but the corridor has changed, as if its insides move like a chest that breathes on its own. And the room with 17, now 18 crosses can no longer be found. Everyone in the village says you made it up. But that night, you dream. In the dream, you're sitting in front of the door, and you hear it's calling your name, softly, one word in Latin you don't understand. When you wake, on your hand is a scratch. One small red cross, new. The days that follow become slow and disorienting. You feel as if something has latched onto you. Not a shadow, not a spirit, but a foreign attention that never looks away. You sit in your room, staring at a white wall, and feel that something is behind it. You walk to the store, touch a door handle, and you hear the castle door open again, not in your ears, but in your chest. You dream every night, but your dreams never have a beginning. They always start in the middle. There's always the sound of soft tapping, always a stone corridor. And always you see the crosses change, sometimes 20, sometimes 30, sometimes none at all, as if all attempts to seal it have completely failed. There's nothing you can show, no proof, but you feel you're not alone. At a train station, you meet an old man who stares too long. His eyes are empty, but his hands are covered in scars shaped like triangles. At the library, a little girl draws something on your book's cover, a circle with 7 tiny crosses inside it. When you ask her how she knew the shape, she just smiles and says it came from her mother's old bedroom. You don't even know what it means, but the symbol keeps appearing. In fogged mirrors, in your backyard, in the folds of an old jacket you haven't worn in years. All of it feels like a reminder that you never truly left that castle, that maybe you only changed its shape. The castle is no longer on the hill. It walks beneath your skin. It waits behind your eyes, and that sealed room now sleeps inside you, calling softly in a voice only you can hear. Your voice begins to change slowly, not in tone, but in pauses, to start speaking like someone who chooses their words too carefully, like someone afraid a wrong phrase might open something that should remain locked. People around you don't notice at first, but they start to feel you're never truly present. When they laugh, you only half smile. When they ask how you are, you answer softly, as if listening to another voice in your head trying to offer a different reply. You begin writing down your dreams, not to remember them, but to see if the writing stays the same each day. But it never does. The dream is alive. It creeps like mist, slipping through cracks you didn't even know were there. There is always a room, sometimes filled with bodies, sometimes just empty. But you know something is waiting. And every time you wake, your body feels slightly heavier, as if something came back with you. You avoid mirrors now because sometimes when you look too long, you don't see your own eyes. You see that room reflecting itself behind your pupils. One stone wall, one cracked cross, and the marks of hands that once carved something into the floor. You try to close your eyes, but in the dark, the room is clearer. Its walls glow faintly. The air inside it is wet, and you know the room is not finished. There is something still not out. Or worse, there is something you haven't realized you've already released. Maybe not a ghost. Maybe not a demon. But something that was once named, then forgotten, and now it is trying to remember itself through you. Now imagine you're standing right in front of that door. The old wooden door you saw in your dreams has somehow emerged into waking life. It's set into the corridor of the castle, at the far end where light thins and silence thickens. 17 crosses are still visible on its surface, though time has eaten away their edges and moisture has dulled the wood. Your hand hesitates to touch it, but curiosity proves stronger than fear. You approach. Your steps are slow, as if even the stone floor tries to hold you back, whispering for you to turn away. But something inside you keeps moving forward. Something not entirely yours. Around you, the air grows heavy, not hot, but suspended. The scent of old wax and burnt wood drifts from the cracks in the door, blending with a faint metallic temps. You don't know what waits behind it, but you know you've been there. Maybe in dreams. Maybe in someone else's memory. You place your palm against the door. Its surface is cold, but it feels alive, like the skin of a stone that still holds a heartbeat. Then you hear it. Not a loud voice, just breath, but so close, as if from the other side of the wood. Not a scream, not a cry, just a long, slow exhale. A greeting from a space sealed for centuries. And in that moment, you realize you're not just opening a door to the past. You're opening a door to something unfinished. That room is not dead. It was only waiting for a new body. When the door finally opens, it does not groan or creak, it exhales. A soft sigh, as if the room behind it breathes out after a long slumber. Its hinges move slowly, burdened by air that had been trapped for generations. Inside, the room is not as dark as you imagined. There is a faint light, like moonlight, filtered through a high, narrow window. Dust spins in the light beam, dancing slowly like particles of time. The stone floor bears no footprints, but the walls are filled with carvings. Not writing, not ordinary drawings, but patterns unknown to you. Symbols that feel foreign, yet oddly familiar. In one corner, there is a candle long extinguished, its wick still intact, as if snuffed only moments ago. Below it lies a circle made from splinters of wood, bones, and strands of red thread. There is no stench, no blood, yet the air feels dense. Every breath seems to inhale a story left untold. You step inside, and the floor does not complain. The room feels unbound by time. Not old, not new, just constant. Around you, you feel watched, but you cannot find the gaze. Not by human eyes, but by silence that remembers. You try to speak, but your voice sinks. Human speech means little here. Only breaths, heartbeats, and seconds kept in stone. You sit on the floor, and without meaning to, you close your eyes. This room is not frightening. It is only hungry for attention. And now you have given it. The next morning, no one believes you ever entered that room. The castle guards swear the lock was never broken. The chains and beams still hang in place, untouched. But you know you went in. The dust on your clothes, the scent of damp stone on your collar, and the strange taste still lingering on your tongue are proof you cannot share. You walk through the castle corridors, but your steps feel heavier now. Something came with you. Not a ghost, not a spirit, but that silence. It clings to you as though you carry a small fragment of that room within you now. People speak to you as usual, but your voice never quite aligns with theirs. You smile and reply, but always a second too late, as if you're hearing them from afar, beyond a thick wall. At night, when you try to sleep, you hear faint sounds behind your thoughts. Not words, but vibrations. Like a floor holding echoes of footsteps long gone. Sometimes you dream of the symbols on the walls, rearranging them into new sequences you've never learned, yet feel correct. Morning arrives and you're not tired. You're not refreshed either. You simply are. Like that room, time no longer fully applies to you. You begin to notice small things. Cracks in the stone, the song of night insects, the direction of the wind. Everything feels meaningful, as if they speak in a language you once did not understand. And the days pass, though you cannot count how many. People begin to look at you the way you looked at that room, with curiosity and a little fear. They sense something unsaid within you. And perhaps that something no longer belongs to this world. Eventually, you stop trying to explain. Words feel too narrow to express what has shifted inside you. Every sentence you speak sounds like a poor copy of what you truly feel. So you remain silent. You choose to observe. The castle continues in its usual rhythm. Servants sweep the halls. Silver is polished until it gleams. Nobles laugh in the brightly lit dining room. But you no longer feel part of it. You are like a spectator in a play who already knows the ending, yet stays seated in the front row. One afternoon, you walk past the cellar and hear a sound that almost isn't there. A breath, long, deep, and lonely. You stop, staring at a stone wall that now seems more brittle than before, and you realize the sound doesn't come from behind the wall. It comes from within you, as if you remember something you never experienced, recalling things that aren't yours. Does that room hold a kind of consciousness? Were the symbols on the walls not just carvings, but fragments of an ancient tongue still longing to be heard? You don't know, but you do know that your presence is no longer entirely your own. Like an old mirror holding the reflection of someone long gone, you have become a dwelling place for something once sealed. You cannot explain how you know, but you feel that the room is no longer truly empty. It lives in silence, waiting. And you are its new door. Day by day, you begin to understand that everything in this castle seems to carry memory. The stairs creak in the same places as if replaying the footsteps of someone long gone. The curtains in the central hall sway even though the windows are tightly shut. Plates in the kitchen are sometimes found out of place, though no one used them the night before, but no one asks. No one wants to know more. This castle, like its inhabitants, has learned not to probe too deeply, because every question might summon an answer that was never meant to be heard. You begin to walk more slowly. Bow your head lower and listen longer. For the longer you stay, the more you realize the whispers you hear are not sounds from outside, but echoes from within yourself, slowly changing. Something unfamiliar yet intimate begins to seep into your thoughts. Sometimes you wake up with tears on your face, though you remember no dream. Sometimes you smell the scent of burning candles and anointing oil no one ever used. Sometimes you find your name written on the wall in a hand you don't recognize, but no one else sees it. The castle seems to reveal itself only to those quiet enough to hear, empty enough to be filled, and fractured enough to be entered. And you, without realizing it, have become all of those things. Were you chosen or merely convenient? No one knows. But your steps now match the rhythm of this place. You are no longer a guest. You've become part of something older than history, deeper than time. And whatever they once sealed now walks with you, silently in shadow. Some nights, you hear footsteps very soft, as if from someone not fully alive. The steps don't always come from the main hallway. Sometimes they echo from behind stone walls that should be solid. Sometimes from beneath the floor of the room where you sleep. They are never hurried, never mistaken in direction, as if they know exactly where they are going. You've learned not to move when you hear them, not to open your eyes, not to sit up, because somehow your body knows that the sound is not meant to be seen, not meant to be met. In the morning, you try to forget. You keep yourself busy cleaning the same room, over and over, lighting fires even when the air isn't that cold, just to feel real. But night always returns. And with each night, the sound draws nearer, slower, more familiar. One night, you wake to find your door slightly ajar. No wind, no animal, no reason. But the hinge creaks in a tone too deliberate to be random. You rise slowly, close it again, and sit on your bed with your back tense and frozen. In the kind of silence that feels too thick, you hear a breath. Not yours, not from outside, but from the space between the bed and the floor. And you do not turn. Because you know, from the way that breath mimics the rise and fall of your chest, something is trying to adapt. Something is learning to become like you. In the days that follow, you begin to feel you're never truly alone, even when no one is around. The air inside the castle no longer feels stilled, hums faintly with echoes of something you never fully see. You begin to notice the sound of cloth brushing against stone, the gentle contact of fingers tracing wooden surfaces, and sometimes a voice faint, uncertain, trying to repeat a name you never shared with anyone. Something here is trying to understand human life, but in the wrong way. As if it can only mimic from leftover impressions, from vibrations trapped in the walls, from breaths once held by fear. One night, you sit in the dining hall at the long table lined with empty chairs, and you hear a chair slide at the far end. Not quickly, not violently, just enough to tell you that you're not alone. You try to speak, your voice is dry and slow, asking if there's something it wants to hear. But there is no answer. Only the metallic clink of an old spoon falling from the table, even though there is no wind. This castle seems to be learning, but it doesn't understand limits. It doesn't know when to stop. It doesn't know what should be touched and what should be left to die. And you, once only a temporary caretaker, now begin to feel like part of its process. You're no longer a witness. You're being repeated, recorded, stored in a pattern you cannot grasp. And every night, when you close your eyes, you hear versions of sounds you once made yourself. But not in your voice. Slower, heavier, and far too deep to be human. When morning arrives, the sky looks paler than usual. Not from fog, but as if the color of the world itself is fading. You touch the castle walls and feel warmth, as if they retain the body heat of something that never leaves. Inside, the furniture no longer sits where you left it the night before. Chairs have moved. Doors are open, even though you clearly remember locking them. A book you placed in the library is now lying on the basement floor, open to a page filled with crosses and numbers that have been scratched out. You don't know who did it. But the longer you stay, the more you realize this isn't about ghosts or restless spirits. It isn't about a soul searching for peace. It's about something older than names, quieter than prayers. A presence that never wanted to be knownly remembered. It copies life the way humans copy ancient texts, without understanding the meaning, just repeating to avoid being lost. And you, once a researcher, now feel like a manuscript being read by something that has no eyes. You wait for noon to fully brighten the room, but light never reaches the deepest corners. And in that place, you feel time stop. The clock does not tick. The air does not shift. You close your eyes and realize you were dreaming of this castle even before you arrived, as if your memories had already been touched long before you stepped through the gates. What was sealed in the room with 17 crosses may not be a creature. It may be a pattern, a memory given shape. And now, it's trying to copy you too. Some objects in this castle seem untouchable. Not because of rules, but because each time you reach for them, your fingers lose their resolve. There is an old mirror hanging in a narrow corridor, and your reflection always arrives half a second too late. At first, it looks like a normal mirror. But the longer you stand in front of it, the more you feel that the figure inside isn't copying you, it's watching. It doesn't imitate, it observes. In the basement, you find a floor etched with symbols that don't seem to belong to any known church tradition. Maybe they're crosses, maybe they're not. They're made of looping lines, endless and unresolved, like a thought that never concludes. On the seventh night, you wake to the sound of footsteps that don't come from above or below, but from within the walls. The steps are slow and heavy, as if burdened by time. You don't open the door. You just sit at the edge of the bed, listening to the sound approach and retreat again and again, like a bad memory, unwilling to leave. And strangely, you begin to miss it when silence returns. Because in that total stillness, you realize you are not the only one who feels alone. This castle, though not alive, seems to understand loss. like ruins that still remember the echo of old footsteps, voices that once filled these halls, now hushed. Sometimes you feel that these walls are not just stone. They are pages, and you are being read slowly, line by line, by something that has waited too long to be remembered again. Morning in the castle is never truly bright. The sun rises, yes, but its light touches only the smallest part of the ancient stones, slipping through narrow windows, forming thin lines on the dusty floor. The air remains damp, its chill hanging like a fog that refuses to lift. In the kitchen, the old hearth that once brought warmth is now thick with cobwebs, and the iron pots hanging there look like they haven't been used in generations. No scent of soup, no trace of flame, only silence, dense and patient, like a space long abandoned by time itself. But if you lean in close, sometimes you can hear something inside the hearth. Not wind, not mice. More like breathing, short and occasional, as if the hearth is trying to remember what it once felt like to be warm. In the back corridor, there's a wooden chair that always changes position whenever you return. No one sees it move, but its orientation shifts, sometimes facing the wall, sometimes turned toward the window that overlooks the woods. You've never sat in it. Your instinct tells you it isn't your seat. Maybe it belonged to someone who waited there long ago, waiting for someone who never returned. Behind unlocked bedroom doors, you begin to notice details that shouldn't be there. Neatly arranged blanket you never touched, footprints in the dust shaped like small feet, and a scrap of paper that appeared on the desk without a sound, written in an old hand. Just one sentence: "It's been too long." You don't know who wrote it, but you start to believe you were not the first to try understanding what was once sealed here. And like the others, you begin to understand that some questions don't need answers, they just need to be heard. There's one corridor you've never fully explored. Not because it's blocked, but because every time you try walking to its end, your steps weaken. The walls grow narrower, and the ceiling lower, as if the corridor itself resents being crossed. The light from your lantern never reaches the last wall. It always dims too soon, as though there's an unseen boundary that swallows light and sound alike. In the middle of that corridor, you find a mirror. Not an ordinary one, but a mirror framed with rusted metal. And its surface always looks damp, as if freshly wiped with water drawn from an ancient well. You see yourself there, but not entirely. Your movements don't always match. Your eyes look more tired. Behind your reflection, there's always another figure, faint, but consistent. Like a shadow from the past that clings to this place and refuses to leave. On several nights, you try returning to the corridor, but your steps grow heavier each time. And the night you finally force yourself to walk all the way to the end, you find nothing. Just a hard, cold stone wall. But when you turn around, the corridor behind you has changed. A window that had always been shut is now open, showing a view of the inner courtyard you've never seen before. In the middle of it stands a great tree, its trunk twisted, its leaves scorched without flame. You feel as though you're being watched, but not by a person. There's an old awareness in that place, observing you without sound, and slowly you begin to understand that it wasn't you who discovered the secret of this castle. you were the one who was discovered. Small sounds begin appearing each night. Not screams, not whispers, just a faint ringing. Like a tiny piece of metal being tapped softly, but it doesn't come from the kitchen or the smithy. You start noting the time and direction of the sound, and each time its tone is different. There's a rhythm that seeps into your sleep. At first, it means nothing, just a distant noise. But over time, you recognize a pattern, like a code, like a message being sent but not meant for you. The more you try to understand, the more it feels like you're intruding on something no human was ever meant to witness. On one of the coldest nights of the month, you find an iron nail lying outside your door. No footsteps, and the door is still locked from the inside. You pick it up, and as your fingers touch the metal, you hear a sound. Not with your ears, but deep inside your head, as if the nail holds an echo from somewhere ancient and distant. You can't explain it to anyone without sounding insane, so you keep quiet. But on the following nights, more nails appear under your pillow, between pages of books, even in the pocket of your robe. All different shapes, lengths, and weights. Some are scorched, as if pulled from a fire. Others seem freshly forged, still carrying the scent of charcoal and molten iron. You begin dreaming of a room sealed from the inside, of fingernails scraping wood, and of a stone ceiling that trembles whenever someone says a particular name. A name you never hear fully because you always wake up just before it's spoken. As if the world itself is trying to seal something, to shut it tightly, to trap it. But never fast enough, because whatever hides behind those nails is still moving. You start avoiding the room, not out of fear not in the usual sense, but because your body grows tired whenever you get near. The air around it feels heavier, as if your lungs have to work twice as hard just to breathe. Candlelight always dims near that wall, and no flame lasts more than a few minutes. When you try to bring a crucifix or a holy book, the metal turns icy cold and the pages grow dull, as if the words inside are fading backward. The servants no longer clean the floors in that corridor. They don't explain why, but you know. Every time you approach, your steps slow not from fear, but as if time itself is pulling you back. As if that room is no longer part of the castle, but stands at a crossroads of unnamed places, resting between two worlds that were never meant to meet. Your dreams stretch longer. They don't end when you wake. They continue quietly while you walk, while you read, while you sit in silence. Sometimes you hear your name not spoken aloud, but thought from beyond the wall. There's a moment when you try knocking back. 3 slow knocks, and something knocks in return. 3 times as well, not rushed, not hesitant, but matching your rhythm. You know you should run, or pray, or tell someone, but you just stand there. Because beneath all the fear, there is a curiosity too great to resist, as if you're no longer the guardian, but a part of whatever was sealed. And, slowly, you begin to understand why the 17 crosses failed. Because they weren't meant to lock something inside, but to keep everything else from getting in. Now, time moves strangely inside the castle. The hourglass in the dining room no longer matches the sun outside. Shadows shift across the walls even when the flames stay still. Sometimes you feel the night comes too early, and sometimes you wake up to a brightness that makes no sense. The others say nothing, but you can see on their faces something has changed. They speak more softly, more carefully, as if each word could open something that must remain closed. A servant once joked about the room, calling it the ghost's playground. 2 days later, he was found wandering the courtyard, his eyes vacant, his clothes soaked as though he'd stepped from a river. But there's no river anywhere near. Since then, no one dares speak loudly about the wall marked with crosses. You begin to notice the floor near that room is colder. The stones remain damp, even in summer, and birds never fly past the window facing it. One of the blessed candles you placed in another room, for no reason you can explain, keeps extinguishing at midnight. Even with no draft nearby, you try documenting everything, listing the occurrences, but each time you reread the notes, something is missing. The writing is smudged, or the paper yellows as if burned from within, as though the castle itself refuses to be remembered. Part of you still wants to believe this is illusion, but when you sit alone that night, hearing the knocking again, and a whisper softly repeats your name in a voice low and ancient, you finally understand. This is not just about the room. It is about what human curiosity called forth, and what was too slow to close, before it was too late. Now, take a slow breath. The night air carries the scent of old stone and damp wood, but also a calming stillness. Not everything hidden wishes to be found. Not every door that's shut must be opened again. This castle has stood through hundreds of seasons, and its story is not written in ink, but in whispers and dust. Its inhabitants came and went. The queen, who waited for the sound of her husband's steps. The servant, who closed the windows at night without knowing why. The children who played too close to the wall marked with crosses. They are all shadows now. But shadows linger, especially in places untouched by full light. And night is the time when the old and the now can touch. If you hear knocking, don't answer. If you see candlelight beneath a locked door, don't open it. Let what lies behind it stay unchanged. There's no need to explain everything, no need to fully understand. Even in a world ruled by reason, there is still space for mystery older than language. Now close your eyes. Let this world fade. Let that castle remain in the distance, softened by the fog of time. And if one day you dream you're inside it, simply walking its long corridors, just keep walking. Do not stop at the door sealed with 17 crosses. That place is not yours. That dream is not for you. And if you wake with cold fingers at dawn, don't worry. It's only the wind passing through. Just the wind. Now sleep. You're safe. The night has sealed shut what should never have been opened.